Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming again this week. Today, we have got Jay here as always. Hi, Jay. Welcome.
Hey, Josh. How are you?
And doing fantastic. We've been talking about some clients that we've been working with together and how difficult it's been for some of them to find a home, not just within their price range, but also when they're making an offer on a house, for that offer to get accepted so they're actually able to buy the home. So we thought that we would put together a video today talking about the spring market here in Edmonton in 2024 and how that compares to the last few years and maybe a few reasons that it's looking to be a little bit different. So Jay, how about you tell us a little bit about what's been going on, both in the amount of sales as well as the prices of homes here in Edmonton?
Right. Yeah. So we've been struggling with trying to find homes for some of our buyers in very specific neighborhoods, specific house types. And so what we're finding is, typically we're bidding against 5, 6 other buyers at the same time, depending on the house was initially priced. We had viewed one last week, and after the first day, they raised the price $30,000 because the realtor said it was just out of control. So it's really hard to price houses. Yeah. So in this market right now, it's kind of hard because our data is a bit lagging. We have to don't want to overprice it because, the sellers still want to sell the house. So you can overprice a house still. So that's kind of what we're finding. So, we seeing multiple offers, seeing lots of buyer activities, and we're having a hard time finding good listings to buy. That's definitely what we're finding right now in Edmonton for sure.
Wow. And you know what? I hear it on the other side because the clients are calling me and asking, hey, am I okay at a certain pre-approval amount? And so we're having to provide pre-approval letters a little bit more than we have in the past. So, which makes sense, right? If we're going into 5, 6 different offers all on the same property.
Right. We just won an offer and we had the pre-approval from you. That really helped. The program we run really helped, but all these things together, because the seller has to make sure the buyer they pick that's going to tie their house up for 8, 9 days, the other buyers will leave and forget it and find something else, right? So they want to make sure you're good to go. So these pre-approval letters are definitely helping. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, how about we look a little bit into kind of the number of sales that have been happening over the last few years, kind of what happens in the spring. Everybody talks about a spring real estate market. And, if we look at the chart that's on the screen here, Jay, maybe you can explain it a little bit, but it looks like that spring thing is a very real thing. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so there's peaks and valleys. Typically, no one wants to buy a house. I think if you look at the low point, they're probably going to be December, January, right? And so I guess we should actually just clarify what the difference between the two lines are first, right? So we see a value, the red, the price. So that's talking about house prices and how they're moving throughout the market cycle. The blue one is the total sales volume, how many homes are selling. So if you can kind of just see the peaks and the valleys, and they seem to be kind of evenly spaced out, right? And then that red line, the pricing kind of follows suit. 2022 was an outlier. We see a massive gap, like a big drop, right, from peak to valley there. But otherwise, it's usually pretty predictable. But in the last 5 years, we've had some really crazy incidences, right? And that's changed how the spring and how the fall market performs. There's definitely a spring market. We're definitely in it. And you'll see, way more houses sold, less inventory, and usually you're going to pay a little bit more for your house than you would have if you would have waited or bought the last fall, right?
Of course. And that brings a question kind of, if somebody's thinking about buying a house and it's the springtime now, are they going to just end up paying more, or would waiting until the fall maybe be a better idea? Obviously the future hasn't happened yet, but maybe we can get into a little bit of what might be causing the market in 2024 to be a little bit different than it's been in previous years. But I guess before that, maybe we can just talk about how the market's matured or grown over the last 5 years or so.
Right. So the year obviously is explanatory. 2019, we had 11,400 sales, and that was before COVID came. 2020, we had 11.
That was that 11,000 or so. That was pretty typical of the pre-COVID years, right? Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of normal. Like it wasn't a bad, wasn't a good. It was just like just a good. This is the market. It just was what it was, right? 2019, 11,400. If we go a little back further, we had some some other things happen. but we'll just start from here. So 11.4 pre-COVID. COVID begins 11,561. No one knew what was going to happen. I think if you dive into 2020 numbers, also you'll see like stuff really dropped and stuff even paused. Like I think where you're circling there right now, right? Like that one, that was a low point in the market for sure.
Yeah, because COVID kind of hit in March, and I think April of that year was the lowest price point and the lowest number of sales in the last 5 years. And for a little while we were on lockdown, March, April or so of 2020, we had really no idea what we were going to be seeing. But then things changed a little bit, didn't they?
Yeah, totally. So, peak COVID, which was interesting, was 2021, and we had 16,697 sales transactions. So that was super interesting. We're like, people were like, well, if I'm going to be stuck at home, and they were leaving their condos in droves and moving into single family acreages were really popular, right? So we seen this happen where it was like, okay, so that's a massive jump between 20 and 21. 2022, 16,865, but the rates are starting to push us up. 2023, so last year, yeah.
How about we look
right
at
here.
this 2022, right?
Yeah.
The interest rates started to come up midway through the year. And when they did, it looks like the prices and the number of sales really dropped. So for the end of 2022, that was after the bank had really started increasing the rates from earlier that year, didn't know if it was going to end or not. And so other than the lockdown period of 2020, that actually brought us the lowest number of sales since COVID began. And since before COVID, really.
And there was a big push. People had pre-approvals. They knew the rate was changing. And so they were like, for those 4 months, there's a lot of transactions that happened and a lot of urgency in the market, right? 2023 was really interesting. I think 15,816, we had higher rates. There was a period where we had a really favorable rate, though, for 2 or 3 months, right? In 23?
That's right. Kind of mid-March into about mid-June, we actually had interest rates on 5-year terms around 4.5%. Some lenders are even lower. We had some 3 and 4-year rates all under like between 4.5% and 5%. So
right.
It felt like the period of high interest rates was over. But then actually later in the year 2023, we saw 5-year fixed rates go to almost 6%. So higher than it had even in late 2022. So that was kind of surprising. But if we look at the sales, then it didn't even dip to as low as it did the year before when the rates didn't go as high.
So so we've seen the values and the sales, they dropped, but it was kind of compressed. And I still think that there is this sort of muted enthusiasm, I'll call it, where people were like, it's not going to stay here. The market's going to change. We're going to get, so we still seen, and there are some smart people wading into the water there, and they're taking, shorter term mortgages and buying at a still pretty decent rate, right? But as you can see, like there's kind of like these 2 periods, big drops, but the gap. So I think 2022 spring market, really big from spring to fall, but then you can kind of see these other normals on that chart where, there's a peak, there's a valley in every year, spring peak. But should you wait? Well, I think it depends on your life, right? Like, why are you selling? Why are you buying? Can you wait? Does it make sense? Like, are you going to pay more in rent? Who wants to rent the house to you for 4 or 5 months? There's all these life factors. So perfect world, you would sell and wait, right? And have somewhere magically to live for free. But I haven't found that spot. I don't think that is going to happen, right? So, yeah.
Right. And of course, you run the risk when you're waiting, you do run the risk of maybe the market doesn't actually slow down as much. And there are some reasons to believe that, you've told me about some of the reasons that you're seeing, that maybe we won't see the market slow down very much this fall, especially when we expect that interest rates are going to start trending downward. So unique from the last 2 years where rates have increased in the fall, we're probably going to see some downward rate movement in the fall of this year, which may offset the amount of homes that are sold and to kind of cancel out some of that downward price pressure that is more typical in the fall.
Yeah. So based on affordability, this chart's pretty awesome, right? Like right now, Edmonton, 420,000, 959. You look at the same product type in Calgary, 596,000, all the way up to, over 1.1 in Toronto. 1.3 in Vancouver. Nova Scotia is even higher than us at 443. So,
and that's all of Nova Scotia.
yeah,
It's not even like specifically
right.
Halifax, where it's going to be even more.
Yeah. So there's all these things that are pointing to Edmonton. And so that's one of the reasons. The other thing, like we used to get calls, Toronto, Vancouver, like that's really normal. But Calgary started calling even more so than they have before. And they're actually selling out at a higher price, moving here, massive savings, right? They can upgrade the type of home they own. So we're starting to see Calgary calling here as well. And people are stopping to even look in Calgary, and Toronto, Vancouver's maybe skipping over that, coming right here and just like deciding this is the place to be. So we're going to see that. The other thing that most people aren't talking about right now, what about land availability? So we're going to see a land squeeze, and builders are going to have a problem with lots, and they're not going to have a lot of available land to build on next year. I think in 12 months from now, unless something drastic happens, there's going to be a problem with new home construction sales, like just the availability to put it on the land, right? So that's going to be another factor. Yeah.
And last week we talked about the government trying to encourage municipalities and encourage consumers and Canadians to build more homes, but they're obviously facing an upward battle because the municipalities are the ones with the jurisdiction over that. They're the ones that are opening up land for development. Are we seeing in Edmonton kind of more redevelopment or gentrification of the older neighborhoods to offset some of that, or is it really just we need more green pasture development?
We don't have enough space, right? And we don't have enough time. So one of the issues is people are coming here and they have nowhere to rent really, and they need to buy something. So they can't really tear it down and rebuild. So it needs to be done, ready to go. That's what these buyers want. They don't even want to do landscaping or fence, right? So that's the hurdles that new construction's facing. So we need to have inventory standing ready for these buyers to buy. So the gentrification will help a little bit, but the big money doesn't go there, right? So land developers are they're the ones taking the big risk. So they need to make sure that what they're putting out there's a buyer for sure. Yeah.
So it looks like we'll probably see an ongoing demand for more real estate in Edmonton. It might not slow down the same way that Toronto has seen or Vancouver has seen, even though they're still experiencing upward pressure. But being one of the biggest cities with low home prices in Canada, we're going to see some demand for Edmonton's real estate. And we might see, as difficult as it is for those wanting to get into the market, we might see things normalize where Edmonton gets back to a more normal price differential with Calgary, which means we have some upward movement. And that's going to be often or likely fueled by lack of inventory and increased demand, those basic economic principles that I think we all understand at least a little bit.
Yeah, totally agree. We don't have a crystal ball, but we can kind of talk about so what's happening now compared to some of the other months, right? So what happened for the last few years. So if we look at the number of say the sales volume, over, I guess, let's just talk about 2022, 2023, and 2024. 2022, I think it was in the first 3 months, we had about 4,900.
That's right here. This is that really big up spike that happened at the beginning of 2022.
Right.
Okay.
So 2023, 2,800.
A little bit lower because if you look closely at the line here, it starts to increase. Just the bump is a bit later in the year than it was in 2022. So, okay.
Now we're back to the 4,200.
So we're a lot closer to early year volumes, more mimicking the 2022 numbers when rates were still really, really low. So, the total year for 23 versus 22 was actually quite similar. The bulk of the volume was just shifted more to the center part of the year instead of the first part, right? And so maybe this year, if we're seeing things pick up like 2022 did, but we don't have the adverse effect of the increasing interest rates like that year had, is it possible that 2024 will have more sales than either of the previous 2 years?
Well, I think there's a potential, just as we had the 2022, how it mimicked really aggressively down. There's some things in place that there's a chance 2024 could do that, right? So if we see interest rate is lowering, which we're all pretty confident, we're pretty hopeful it's going to happen. So that's a very big driver. We got this huge demand. We got these out of town buyers flooding in the market. And then, if you say, okay, well, also though, there's no more inventory because we don't maybe have this as much available product. That's the other metric that could absolutely push that straight up. So maybe prices
that'll push the price up,
Yeah.
even if the volume
Correct.
isn't as high because there's nothing to buy.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think they'll run parallel up. It'll be an exciting year to see what happens. Right now, we're not on the same pace as 2022 was, but obviously the metrics are completely different. So the next 3 months are going to be exciting to watch.
Okay. Well, I guess what we can do is we can commit to everybody to come back with more of this information
Yeah.
as we have more of the information, and try to keep everybody up to date with what's happening here in Edmonton. And we look forward to connecting with all of you over the coming months. For those of you who haven't yet, please tap on like for the video, click on subscribe, hit the bell there so you get the notifications. We have these videos coming out every Wednesday, and we're so happy that you spent the time to watch this one, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.